podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome back to Humans of Speedway, the podcast which gets to know some of the heroes and unsung heroes of one of the most exciting sports there is. I'm Ian Brannan. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. And of course, if you enjoy listening, I'd love it if you can leave us a review too. Now, the name of my next guest has always been one of the most mentioned whenever I've asked you who you'd like to hear on a future episode, and for good reason, because he's one of British Speedway's all-time greats. Chris Morton. Now, Belle Vue Speedway, probably the most well-known and iconic team name in World Speedway, and for 17 years he was at the heart of that team in a racing career starting in the early 70s and ending in the early 90s, and in that time he rode alongside or against Speedway's legendary names. He was British Under-21 champion, British champion, three-time Northern Riders champion, Intercontinental champion and seven-time world finalist, and winner of the World Team Cup in 1980 and the World Pairs in 1984 alongside his great friend Peter Collins. His real legacy, though, stands for all to see today in Manchester in the form of the National Speedway Stadium. After the demise of the iconic Hyde Road Stadium, you're going to hear how Chris turned his dream of recreating that track he grew up with into a reality after a huge fight. But one of Chris's mottos on track was never giving up, and that certainly was required through this time too. He's also going to describe how his dream meeting will look, and as a man who's created his dream track already, that should be pretty simple for him. You're in for a treat over the next 90 minutes or so, as it gives me the very great pleasure to welcome to Humans of Speedway, Chris Morton MBE.
Thank you, Ian. Well, I'm flattered to hear that there's been lots of requests for me, but it's lovely to be on here, and I just feel it's the nostalgia for Speedway is something that's live and kicking.
It certainly is, and I think that on this particular podcast we speak to all sorts of different people. So we've had referees, we've had commentators, we've had track staff, all sorts of different areas of the sport. But the ones that people really love hearing from are the riders of a certain era, and you, I think, span both of the eras of like the 70s and certainly through the 80s and early 90s, particularly. I think people have a fondness for, and you tick all three boxes.
Well, that's good. It seems that the span obviously those eras. Also on machines as well. I covered quite a few different engines during my time.
Yeah, absolutely. And so many different riders as well from different eras. So many great riders going back to the likes of Ivan Major and Ollie Olsen through to Per Jonsson and Eric Gunderson and all that. And we're going to talk through all of those.
Yes.
We'll start at the beginning, though. Speedway, for you, you started out in a slightly different way from many, because some people that I've spoken to have had like family members who have been involved in the sport. And tell us about your route, because you were first and foremost a young fan, like many of us, on the terraces going and watching Belle Vue, and you were like so many of us used to do as well, riding around on your push bike, pretending you're one of your heroes, and you made the dream come true. Tell us about all of that.
Well, it goes back. I've got, as many of your listeners will know, I've got an older brother, Dave, who's he's just under 3 years older than me. So my father used to go and watch Speedway before he got married and we were born, and so it wasn't something new to him. But we found out that one of our friends, Peter Collins, used to go to Speedway. So Dave elected me to suggest to my mum and dad that we go to Speedway one night. This must be back in the early 60s, probably about 63. And so, I was the one that was nominated to ask our parents. And I think my dad probably jumped at the chance, to be honest.
Yeah, I would have thought.
And I think through our first season, which would be 63 and 64, we went a few times. And then towards the end of maybe 64, 65, we were regular goers every Saturday night.
And as so many people did. And when did that sort of interest then manifest itself into a keen hobby almost of wanting to take it a step further and having a go? And I know that you really learned your craft on Peter Collins's parents' farm, didn't you?
Yes, and my first ride on a motorbike was on the back of Peter on the bike that he had. I'd be about 7 at the time, I think. And when that changed from being a fan to thinking maybe I could be a speedway rider, I don't really know where that changed, because if it ever did, because as long as I could remember, that's what we were thinking of doing. You know, the gang of people or of lads that used to ride on their push bikes and slide it in the yard in the farm. We always wanted to be speedway riders. We had no idea that the process that we were going through, which was riding bikes and riding motorbikes and push bikes, was just a great learning situation for us, as good as any training school probably, because we took to proper racing on grass track and then onto speedway like a duck to water, to be honest. Nearly all of the group that were doing the riding together.
Did you have like the race jackets and all that kind of stuff, or?
No, at some point I probably got a steel shoe, but no, it's just riding in. Always wearing a helmet. That was one of the most important things. Yeah. Other than that, it was whatever was rough and ready. I did go to a fancy dress once at school, dressed as a speedway rider. I can remember my mum making a helmet out of paper mache. But that was as close as I got to wearing speedway gear until I became a speedway rider.
Yeah, I have never ridden a speedway bike, and there's probably good reasons for that. But when I was a youngster and I was growing up as a Halifax Dukes fan, and I had a race jacket with the elephant on, and yes. My dad used to work for the post office when he was younger, and I had like a hard hat. It was like a builder's hard hat, but it was red. Yeah. So that's all you needed for the instant Kenny Carter fan club kit.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that. Yeah, we actually we named Halifax Dukes Halifax Flukes. That was our pet name for them. So,
based on what brought that about?
I don't know. It just sounded great as kids, you know. So.
There was such a great rivalry between the two, though, wasn't there?
There was. I mean, yeah, and that was something that I think during my let's say childhood career as a fan, there was only 3 other tracks that I went to before I became a rider, and that was one was Halifax, Sheffield, and Coventry, and so they were the only 3 other tracks I ever went to, other than Belle Vue, till I became 15, 16.
Yeah, and riding them. But yeah, I mean, three great tracks, 3 big tracks as well. You know, decent size wind it on tracks too.
Yes, yeah.
So when you were growing up then and learning your craft alongside Peter Collins, did you have a feeling as to that the two of you could actually make it at any point then? And could you spot that Peter also had something special?
Yeah, I think it was quite obvious. I mean, Peter to some degree led the way, because he was the first to get a grass track bike. Although he was just slightly younger than my brother. During the time when Peter got a grass track bike, Dave was saving up to get his first grass track bike, and we were a few months behind where Peter was, and it was going to be another couple of years before I became, in a position to be able to start grass track racing, which was the stepping stone to speedway for all of us, really, because we used to go to a lot of the grass track meetings, certainly all the local ones, which was where many of us and certainly myself became fans of Chris Pusey, because he was kind of a local lad that made good, and he was probably he was an influence for sure, because you could see that he was from similar background to us, working class background, and we saw him on the grass track meetings, and then one day he appeared at Belle Vue and very quickly got into the team. And so we could see the possibilities, and I was never any doubt, really, to be honest. I can just remember as a child. I can remember watching once with some friends. We took some friends along, and I'd probably be about 10. And I remember telling this girl that I was going to be a speedway rider. So it was kind of, as far as I was concerned, that was all it was. It was definitely going to happen.
Yeah. And Chris Pusey, of course, was important in you getting into the Belle Vue team, because it was his misfortune that led to Team Spaces opening up later on, didn't it, further down the line? Yeah,
it did. Well, I'd done a few months at, I'd done a grass track season in 72, because I wasn't 16 until the July. I've admitted this before, so it's not a revelation, this, but I got my ACU licence by saying that I was 16 in March. So in 1972, I had a licence, so because my brother had already done a season grass track racing, so the two of us were doing the grass track racing together in 72, and so I did. By the time I got to being the following year, and so I was obviously 16 by then. I did the training school at Belle Vue during 72, 73, and I think my brother had gone to New Zealand then, and he was in New Zealand. So in 72, 73, I was doing the training school at Belle Vue, and then as the 73 season started, I was doing the second halves at Belle Vue, and then was also doing the second halves at Ellesmere Port. And so I'd signed for Belle Vue by then, and I think Dent Oliver had spotted me during the training schools at Belle Vue, and probably encouraged also by Jim Rollington, who was the guy who supplied all the grass track bikes for, as it was, Chris Pusey and PC, and then later myself. But I think he influenced Dent Oliver in getting me signed for Belle Vue. And so come it would be about the April or May, I was put in the Ellesmere Port team. And then I think sometime later in May or in June, Chris Pusey got injured, and so I ended up doing both Belle Vue and Ellesmere Port.
Double bubble. And
yes.
You're not the first person to be on this podcast who's actually done the same thing with the age on the license application, because
that's right.
Gary Havelock revealed he'd also done the same.
Yeah, it's graceful.
Right. Well, I think with Javi, I think his birthday was literally like 2 days after the end of the season. I think he brought it forward just so he could ride in the last meeting of the season or something like that. Yeah. Mentioning there, though, you were doubling up with Ellesmere Port and then into the Aces team when Chris Pusey broke his arm. That must have been the stuff of dreams to be lining up in that Aces race jacket for the very first time. What are your memories of your very first Aces appearance back in 73?
My first meeting for Belle Vue was at Cradley. I think I scored 6 points. I was scoring better for Belle Vue than I was for Ellesmere Port.
Well, that's probably quite important in the end.
Well, the thing was that was the Ellesmere Port thing for me. It was almost like a little bit like, because when you're a teenager of that age, you kind of, your own mind fairly well. And the Ellesmere Port thing was definitely a stepping stone. I wasn't like thinking, hit the big time and Ellesmere Port. It was just for me to get to ride for Belle Vue. That's all I wanted to do.
Yeah, so Belle Vue was, without saying it, but Belle Vue was definitely the priority.
Yes.
And so in 74 was your first was that your first official season where you were signed into the team as such?
Yeah, I suppose so, because I did, I more or less did almost a full season, but 74 was my full season just riding for Belle Vue.
Yeah, and that was a big season, wasn't it? Because you had quite a lot of success there. There was the Peter Craven Trophy, which must have been a huge thing to win because of the the whole
big deal, that.
Being a Belle Vue fan and obviously riding for them as well, and all the history that goes with it.
Yeah. I mean, I do mention it in the book about the, as when you get a little bit older, times and years don't seem that far apart. But when I was, if you go, I think it's 68, Ivan was world champion. And the Peter Craven Memorial Trophy was run, I think, for the first time. I'm not certain about that. But I have a very vivid memory of Ivan having won the meeting, going round the track on the tractor, which was often the case, holding this magnificent trophy, which now sits in one of my rooms at home. And I remember looking at that and thinking, wow, that's such a fantastic trophy. And not thinking that, perhaps I'll win it one day, because I was only 10 at the time, maybe 11. And they are 6 years later, I've won the meeting. It was childhood dream stuff. But, that was... and the reason why that happened really was that I was fortunate or asked to try and develop this Jap engine that was trying to compete with Jawas. And it was the short stroke Jap, which was a 4S, which Jim Rawlinson was trying to help them develop. And I rode that for most of that season. I won the Peter Craven on it. I think within the space of a month I'd won that, and I also won the junior championship on that same bike. But the problem was it kept blowing conrods. Conrods kept breaking, so it had a flaw. Although it was they were fast engines, it couldn't hold itself together, and so it became a problem because in the end, I think due to market forces, it was never going to survive because Joe was just such an easy bike to ride, and it was, and say easy, let's say easier to ride, and the Jap was struggling. The standard Jap was struggling, and the new 4S was fast enough and could compete, but it kept blowing up.
We'll do more questions in a little bit later on, but one of the questions that I was asked was from a guy called John Southwell, who said, did you consider moving to the 4-valve Jawa from 77 to 80?
I saw that, yeah,
when they won 4 world finals in a row.
Yeah, well, I was having fairly reasonable success, let's say, on the West Lakes, which were great. So I did get one actually off. I was offered one off Barry Briggs because he was the agent for them. I can't remember if that was 78 or 79. I'm sure it was in 78. So I did have one for a short time. In fact, I know because I remember where I was living. So it must have been in early 78 when I moved that on to, strangely, Bruce Pennell had come over. He wanted this 4-valve Jawa off me, which I let him have.
Oh, there you go, and the rest is history.
Yeah, that's right.
So, and you mentioned the British Under-21 Championship as well that you won. I mean, these are all great successes, considering you've only been riding for you're in your second season as such, really.
Stunning, really. I mean, and I'm not trying to big myself up here, but yeah, it was. But that's due to all the, watching as a supporter and having. As kids, having what you might call, I'm not really good with the word hero, but people that you are influenced by, they're really, really important because they're the things that kind of drive you forward. And with all the riding and all the things that we did, basically playing and enjoying ourselves, the skill level you get to is quite remarkable, really, and so. When we jump on bikes that are built proper things for racing grass track and speedway, suddenly everything that you've learned just falls into place and what you're doing comes naturally.
And some of the quality of the riders, though, that you'd be watching at Belle Vue at the time, Ivan Major, you mentioned Chris Pusey, and so many others as well. You really were watching the very best riders in the world.
Of course, yeah. I mean, Soren Sejostin was my favourite, and I took a lot from what he did, and maybe his style influenced me in some way, because and that was another thing. It was great to become part of a team that he was in as well. These people that you've been following for all your childhood, and then suddenly they become friends.
Something that doesn't really happen so much now, but the teams remaining fairly constant from year to year as well. Nowadays the teams can be entirely different from one season to the next.
Yeah, they can do. I mean, some of that is obviously about the rules, and all teams are always trying to win anyway. And so, although there was rider control certainly during some of my time, the 60s, I think, rider control, where they used to share the good riders out and tell riders where they had to go. It's a competition, isn't it? And so everybody tries to have the best team that they can within the rules that are laid down.
You're listening to Humans of Speedway. That is the voice of one of British Speedway's all-time greats and a Belle Vue Aces legend as well. Chris Morton MBE joins me in this episode, and before the end he's going to be describing his dream Speedway meeting. And we're going to be talking about one of his big legacies to Speedway as well, which is the National Speedway Stadium, and find out how that dream was born really as soon as Hyde Road was closed. Going to talk all about that very soon. But right now I want to talk about individual success that you had, because whilst there was a lot of success with Belle Vue, which we're going to come back to, you did have a lot of individual success. For example, 7 world finals, and you came British champion as well, British under-21 champion. Did you find that there was a bit of a learning curve and a different skill required
Certainly is.
for individual speedway versus perhaps what you're used to riding alongside your teammates?
Yeah, there is a big difference in it, and some riders take to it and some don't. And I remember a moment, just some clarity once, realising that some of these riders, it came clear in British finals really, that you've got riders who really give you a hard time, difficult to beat on their own track. They're a threat on when I used to race game at Belle Vue. When it came to the if you like, the big time, the British final type, which was where it really started to get tough. Getting through the semi-finals is something that reasonable riders should be able to do. Getting in the top 8 of a semi-final to get through to a British final is something that a rider of my level should be able to do. Not easily, because it's never easy, but there's always that, you might have a bad race and you get things together and you get through them. But British finals are different ball game, because by then you've really weeded out the weak ones, and so they're all good. But I noticed that some of them, they just fall by the wayside and just didn't make it happen at the British finals. And for some period I was one of those, and you start to realise that it's a different mindset you have to get into to be able to up your game. Because when you become quite a good speedway rider, it's almost, it's just like doing the day job. It's you jump on the bike and you go out and do it, and you for someone like me, I'd win some races, I'd may get some seconds. My job was to beat the heat leaders. I could beat most second strings. And so I think in league racing, I would rarely run a last place, rarely be third. But when you get into the higher levels like British finals and things, you start running the odd last, and it like shakes you up a bit, and you realise that you've got to approach it in a different way.
And it was only 2 or 3 years into your what you call professional career, but before you got to the beyond that level as well, in terms of qualifying for world finals, intercontinental final at Wembley. I mean, the massive stadium. Whenever we're going to come to the Speedway Paradise bit where we design your dream meeting in a little while, but Wembley often gets suggested as like the ideal place to have a a meeting. What was your first experience of Wembley like back in 1976?
Quite incredible, but you still I think I was 20 at the time. So 76, yeah, it would have been 20 that year. So I was seemingly I was taking these things in my stride, and so of course it was a big deal, and it's some great memories from that, but I didn't let it faze me. I mean, and it can do, and maybe it did later on. I don't know, but being there at Wembley, I can remember the practice and all of that, and then on the actual night, quite incredible. Where you walk. I can remember walking out from the changing rooms, and because seeing the crowd for the first time, and it was overwhelming, not in a psychological way, but overwhelming in as much as it was such a fantastic sight. I mean, I'd been there before to World Team Cup meetings, I think, and World Finals, so I knew what it was like. But to be there as one of the competitors, it was such a wonderful experience.
On the inside, Chris Morton, 4 points from England. Next to him, Ivan Major, 4 points from New Zealand. Grid 3, Billy Sanders, 4 points. On the outside, Soren Schossen. The inside grid's the one to watch. Major, the old fox, has made the jump in second place. It is Morton in third place in white. It's Sanders. But Ivan Major, the galloping Major, whenever he gets the sniff of the world title in his nostrils, he goes like a long dog. Made a colossal start from grid 3. Chris Morton, this young man going very, very wide around the outside, and he's going to do him, and he's done it in the most beautiful piece of cornering. Morton went outside Ivan Major as though he was stood still, and that really was another superb piece of speedway. Barry Briggs, this young man has come on a ton, hasn't he? And Ivan's really struggling now.
Yeah, fantastic, Dave. I think the day that young Morton saw Peter Collins whipping around the outside down in the first corner, and he's done exactly the same to Ivan, and boy, he's going to be a threat in the final, let alone tonight.
You did get to the world final that year, which was
I mean, I was
a big event, and that was the year that Peter won the world
final,
championship too. But he actually acknowledged how great you'd done in that meeting, didn't he? Afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, I've not heard any footage on that, but yeah, he was. I think he was really pleased that we both managed to, because he'd been in a few world finals by then.
Yeah.
But I think there was 5 or 6 of us probably 5 got through from the Intercontinental through to the world final. So it was great for British Speedway.
And whilst that was your first world final, it certainly wasn't your last. You qualified for 7 world finals through the course of your career from 1976, your final world final appearance in 1988. So much different eras as well from when you started to when you finished with your final appearance in a world final. One of them, though, was the world final that many fans regard as one of the greatest ever.
Good evening and welcome to Wembley Stadium for the 36th staging of the World Individual Speedway Championship, sponsored by the Sunday Mirror.
Whilst the 1981 World Final at Wembley, the final World Final to be held at Wembley as well, is raved about by many Speedway fans. For you personally, you found that whole experience a tricky evening.
It's taken me a few years to come back to this meeting, because the frustration for me after having I qualified for the World Final in 76. It was then 3 years before I managed to qualify for a World Final again, and that wasn't really anything to do with general form. I was just screwing up the British final, and I kind of had to get that right. And I think what had happened for me is that in 76 I was second in the British final, then I qualified for the world final, and I think it came a little bit too easy for me. It's not easy, it's a bit flippant that, but I think it had done, and it comes to this thing about league racing and individual meetings, and the only thing that I really want, the bread and butter was riding for Belle Vue, and that was what I wanted to do, and I loved it. But the main thing that I wanted to do, if there was a goal that you had, it was to become a world champion. And so as soon as the World Championship round started, then it was game on, and that was the thing that, and I kept getting tripped up at the British final and not qualifying. And so I was finding that really frustrating. And in 1980, aware that, almost thinking that I can't let this happen again. I can't screw up the British final. And so I'd taken, I felt I needed to do something about it. And so I'd gone to a hypnotist, a local guy. I had a couple of sessions with him. And really, in the end, it was meditation, really, because he did a couple of sessions with me and then said, look, you can do this yourself. And taught me how to, meditate and certain exercises. And so that's what I did. And I started doing a lot of that, where I'd be doing meditation, which was really to focus your mind on what it is that you wanted to do. And that was the thing that got me. I mean, I don't know that for sure, but I mean, it seemed that in 1980, I then qualified for the world final. I got past the British final. So I'd reset myself, if you like, in 1980. And I had a good year in 1980. And so it wasn't unreasonable for me to think that, right, I've qualified for the world final. I'm in with a shout here. And I probably it was the worst experience of my life ever up to then. And I hated it. I think I scored 5 points or something. I was, for my level, I was a disgrace, and it hurt. And so I didn't watch this world final for a long time.
So into Heat 2 with Kenny Carter in red on gate 1, Egon Muller in blue on gate 2, Zenon Plek in white on gate 3, and Chris Morton in yellow and black on gate 4. Well, 2 Englishmen, plenty here for the British fans to cheer at Wembley. Kenny Carter, who represents Halifax, on gate 1, and Chris Morton from Belle Vue, Manchester, on gate 4. Takes away another even start. Good gate rider in white, and the rider in white, and on Plek comes round there. Plek in the lead, hotly pursued by the rider in red, Kenny Carter. And Carter takes an inside lunge. The whole stadium screams. Morton looks for the inside lunge as well. Carter came through, can Morton. Morton gets an extra bit of grip, an extra bit of power. He comes through to second place. Zenon Plek is down. Plek into the fence. And so there are 3 riders left in.
It's a fantastic meeting, and also knew was a master of Wembley, because he'd won certainly 2 of his world finals, maybe all 3, I don't know, Wembley. And so for Bruce Pennell to beat him in the way that he beat him, it was outstanding, and it made it an absolute classic. And I recognise that. I just wish I'd been there, because I was good enough to do far better than I did, and but that's the everybody there is good, and so you've got to overcome that in some way or another.
And that psychological battle that you talked about, one of the key things really that is talked about a lot more now with younger riders, isn't it? But I suppose back in the time that you're talking about, not quite so common, but it really made the difference to your success.
While you're learning to be a speedway rider, and you go out in a race with 4 of you, then it's 80% ability and 20% psychology. Now, when you end up with 4 professional speedway riders on a track together, you can all do it. You're all pretty good at it. So it switches that thing to being, it's 80% psychology, 20% ability, because and even more so in as you get into the bigger meetings, it's all about getting the best out of yourself and learning how to do that. I could do that to some degree, but I don't know if I completely mastered it. But
you were probably doing the psychology thing a lot earlier, because now it's commonplace in sport, isn't it? Whereas then, at that time you're talking about, it was probably fairly unusual. Would that be fair to say? Possibly, yeah. But I can remember realising that
I was looking for something that was going to help me, because I did recognise early on that the psychology side of it was going to be the bit that made the difference. I remember trying to find something I could read about it to help me with that, and I couldn't really find anything, to be honest. I did around that time I started doing some yoga as well, which probably led me to understand a bit more about the meditation. And that's what I used to do that before a meeting. I would the bigger meetings, I'd spend half an hour meditating.
Yeah, and the results from that time onwards really speak for themselves, don't they? Because not only with you qualified for the individual world championships, there was the world pairs and also the World Team Cup as well, which you had many outings with over various different years, but pretty much through the whole of the 80s, really. Yeah, you were there most years, and alongside Peter Collins as well in the one in 1980 when you won it.
Yeah, and I love those meetings at that sort of level. It's very demanding, both physically and psychologically, but it's that challenge, and you start to learn things about yourself and how you deal with it, because it's it's about bringing the best out of yourself, and that's you learn how to do that, but say you don't always get it right because the guy next to you is trying to do the same thing.
Yeah, and of your great races that you look back on in your career, where does the one in the World Team Cup in Germany stack up, where you were behind against Eric Gundersen and Egon Muller and pulled it out of the bag? It was a great race.
It was frustrating that we didn't win that, because it was at the time when the Danes were starting to come through, really, because both Eric and Hans being helped along by Ollie. They weren't, I don't think as a team they were quite as good as we were, but we fell apart a little bit. We were let down by one or two of our team riders that didn't quite get it right, because I don't think we lost by many points, but Denmark definitely, they got it right, because we were good enough to win that again, but it didn't quite work. But yeah, that one race, I was quite interested, because I often find there's a few races in World Team Cups where I've, I think it's that sense of not letting your teammate down, and team racing is can be the thing that brings out the best of some riders, and the World Team Cup certainly gave me some great races. And in that one, I'd gone from the start. I think I was running third. Eric was in front of me, and Egon Muller's like romping away.
King 12, Gundersen impatient to get things moving, and away they go, and Gundersen is who shows. Gundersen leads it. Second place is Morton. Where is Muller? Muller's coming around the outside. He's gone past Morton, and he has gone past Gundersen, and now he's kicking on. And the West German crowd are loving every minute of this. So long an unfashionable nation in World Speedway. Now they're showing the big guns the way home.
And a lot of these German tracks then, they were very flat. They were in great shape, but just flat, no banking on them, and this was typical of that at Olchin, and no one had been venturing out wide and I had nothing to lose. It's like lap 2, and all I'm doing is following Eric.
And Muller has got Eric Gundersen behind him, and Chris Morton is losing touch in third place, and it really has been the most disappointing afternoon for England, it must be said. They're under strength, we know, but we rather felt they might get up and beat the Germans.
So I thought I'll try in the dirt, because this is quite well on in the meeting. It's probably certainly middle of the meeting, maybe even later. And the dirt had moved out, and it was quite a bit heavy. And the thing is, what you've got to be able to do is be ready for it, because if you're not careful, it just picks you off. So I'd moved out a couple of meters wider and found there was this line of dirt that was just so much better than the inside, and so. And that was it. It started I started to catch Eric up.
Into the last lap now, and Chris Morton has gone past Goodnison, and now he's going after Mayer and Muller.
On the last lap, I'm still half a straight behind Egon Muller, and kept up doing the same thing, and that was it. And I think in the end beat Egon by about half a straight.
And just when we thought all might be lost, Morton has produced his party piece. Oh, what a super ride. Just when we thought that the Lion's tail was down, Chris Morton has produced his party piece around the outside of Gunderson, now around the outside of Muller, and he wins Heat 12. And at long last, the Union Jacks are hoist proudly around Olching.
A great race, and that's about trying anything. There's always, well, there may be a way, but be sure you've got 4 laps to try everything. And it worked out great. And I loved riding at those tracks.
And I think Dave Lanning was as staggered as anybody.
Yeah,
caught Dave Lanning out of it, I think. And he was,
Well, let's just have a look at that incredible last lap from Chris Morton again. He suddenly has gained ground on Eric Gunderson. He sails around the outside of him with everything going, and then picks up on Egon Muller. I don't think the West German was looking for him at all, and around the outside again in a really perfect piece of timed overtaking.
One of the things that amuses me at the end of it, because obviously the Germans feeling they're in with a shout, when the cameras go on the German fans, they're all huffing and puffing because Egon's got beat. So it was, yeah.
And that was that around that? Well, it was just before actually he won the world title. But I mean, everybody's got an Egon Muller story, haven't they? I think he's a real character. I've tried to get him on here, and I've spoken to him about it, and we've never actually made it happen yet. But he was quite a character.
I'm sure he'll do it, Egon.
Yeah.
So you've got to appeal to his ego. It's much bigger than he is. Yeah,
well, he's a pop star as well.
Oh, certainly, yeah. Because we used to go when we were doing the long track, and he'd be. Certainly in some of what they would do, they'd book him if he was doing a long track meeting. They'd book him for the meeting and book him for the entertainment after as well. So he was doing his singing.
Double value. I don't know if you've seen Egon Muller's video today. He put a video on his Twitter, and it's about a really bad injury he had, and it's quite graphic. It's a picture of the thing he's put is severe fall in Melbourne, Australia, testicle ripped out, an 8mm bolt shot through my foot, and there's the actual video of this.
Got the testicle hanging out.
We don't need to see this. Anyway, and somebody said I was in Amsterdam in the 80s for a meeting, a tester meeting of the 2-day world final, and I can recall Egon Muller missing it because he got run over by a tram.
Whoa, yeah.
And well, when Egon did win the world final, though, that was 83, wasn't it?
83, yeah.
You were in that world final. You were there, and as eventful as the meeting, probably the afterwards was the thing that in your book you talk about getting in the back of the van, enjoying some German hospitality, and being pulled out of a ditch by Bruce Pennell.
You have to bring that up, don't you?
Yeah. These are the kind of stories people want.
I know. Yeah. No. Well, I probably had, and I'll have to admit it, I probably had a bit too much to drink, I think, which was stupid of me to get in the van and drive. But I felt okay. Whether that was the thing, I don't know. But we came to not knowing all the road signs and everything, not understanding everything. I come to what appeared to be a bend in the road. The sign seemed to indicate there was a bend in the road, but what it didn't really indicate was that it was actually a T-junction. And so by the time I realised it wasn't just a bend in the road, it was actually a T-junction, it braked, and it wasn't going to stop. So I thought, well, we'll just run past the end of the road. There was no traffic about. But the problem was there's like a 10-foot ditch between the road and the field, and we ended up down in the ditch. And so fortunately, very fortunately, we call it the cavalry because some of the American lads, and Bruce, who had finished by then, he was commentating for the Germans. So I think it was Lance King and Bruce Pennell were coming past in their van and pulls us out of the ditch, which was we'd have been lost without them. We were stuck in the middle of nowhere. So yeah. the cavalry saved us.
Pulled out of a ditch by Bruce Pennell. There's not many people can say that about their lives. This is Humans of Speedway. I'm Ian Brannan. Coming up, we're going to be talking about Chris Morton's dream lineup. Who would be in his all-time 1 to 7? And where would he have his dream Speedway meeting? No spoilers, but as he's constructed Britain's National Speedway Stadium, then perhaps that might well feature. Plus, we're going to get the story about the construction and the fight to make that dream a reality as well. Next, though, talking all about Hyde Road on Humans of Speedway. Welcome back to Humans of Speedway, in conversation with Chris Morton MBE, one of British Speedway's all-time greats, certainly a Belle Vue Aces legend. And when you think of Belle Vue, people of a certain age will remember Hyde Road, which was the original home of Belle Vue. And Belle Vue used to also have the zoological gardens next to it and an amusement park, and it was a real day out. But when we're talking about the track, when you were growing up, both as a fan and as a young Speedway rider, to be riding on such an iconic track, one that people still hark back to now, it must have been a real privilege and an honour to be able to ride round Hyde Road. What was it like as a rider to be taken to that track regularly?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I wouldn't know that, wouldn't I? Because that's where I used to go and watch, and that's where I'm going to ride. I had no idea. As a youngster, from being 7 up to even being 15, I hadn't seen many other tracks anyway. So it could have been the worst track in the world for all I knew. But as it turns out, I was very, very fortunate to have been a Manchester lad and wanting to ride Speedway and becoming a Speedway rider and riding at Belle Vue. It was like it fell into place for me in that sense. Because yes, I were again very fortunate to through Speedway ride at many tracks all over the world, and I can genuinely say, I mean, it's probably influenced by the fact that I used to ride at Belle Vue every week. It was the best track in the world, without a doubt. There's others that came very close, but there wasn't any that I could say were better.
And what was it about it? Just the speed you could get up to, the amount of lines there were around it, or?
Yeah, and that's it. It was the different lines. It was wide enough to be fairly safe, as Speedway tracks can be. You know, because some tracks are dangerous. You know, and you've got to ride accordingly. Whereas Belle Vue, you did ride accordingly, but you could push the boundaries more than you could at some other tracks, and certainly more so as you get to know it and you understand the track more. Then that's what you do. And there were so many different lines and ways to ride it, and I learnt them all during my 16 years, I suppose, of riding there. And it was a dream to ride it, you know, and it may be influenced the fact that I wasn't a very good gaiter as well, because I could get away with it. And it was great fun, you know.
And you ended up being the fastest man of all time around Hyde Road, because you broke the track record in the Northern Riders Championship in 1983. It was broken 3 times that night, but you came away with the track record never beaten. Yeah,
it was. It was interesting because it didn't look any. Very often, Speedway tracks where the track record's broken, they can sometimes be a bit unrideable because there's obviously more grip than there would usually be. But this track, when we walked around, you could see that there was just right about a grip in the right place, not too much, you know. It was, and it seemed to be on the cards that the track record might go. And I think Peter beat his track record that he had at the time by a second. I think he had it at might have been 68 something. He took a second off it, and then I think Kenny Carter went out and took a bit more off it, and then I went out in my fourth heat, which I think I was in, and I took another full second off it. So that night there was like 2 seconds came off the track record.
Well, the riders really are going quickly around Belle Vue this evening, because Peter Collins broke the track record first time out, and Kenny Carter got a whole second. The new time is 67.4, and it would seem to us that Chris Morton is going as quick, if not quicker. Morton is really going around here like a long dog. They're into the last lap. Still no change in the minor positions, and that's, again, it's an eyebrow raiser, because Larry Ross really, one would have thought, would have caught up on Steve Finch, but here is Morton, and Morton is really motoring over the line.
Yeah, and that's one of the real most, top of the important things that I ever did was holding a track record at Belle Vue, and in fact, I deem it an honour that Eric Gunderson holds it with me, and no one's going to beat that,
Yeah, because he equalled it, didn't he?
He equalled it, yeah.
Yeah, that's an amazing thing to be the fastest man, joint fastest man around Hyde Road, and it's never going to be knocked, is it? It's
No,
yeah.
that's right.
You also you had your career with Belle Vue, which people well know, but you also had a year with Sheffield as well, which maybe people forget about. But that was a successful year, and you won the Northern Riders Championship again.
I did, yeah. That's it came about that because there's an ex-Speedway rider called Stephen Casey. Some of you more knowledgeable fans out there will remember Steve. He rode at Ellesmere Port and Newport. He started around, he's just a little bit older than me, but started around the same time. He tells me, but he beat me once at the training school at Belle Vue, but fortunately for me, I don't remember. So it's just it's important to him, but not that important to me. But anyway, so Steve, who's it's like he's still at Belle Vue, and he kind of does the looking after the meeting, he's meeting coordinator, I suppose is the name for them. So he's still involved at Belle Vue, Steve. And he was during 94, I think it was 94, wasn't it, when I rode for Sheffield?
93.
Yeah. So he's, he'd phoned me up, he said, "Are you coming down to Belle Vue?" And I wasn't going that often then. I was trying to create a new life from being a Speedway rider, and I struggled with it. I mean, if we'd go back to my retirement, when I retired in 1990, it was a strange sensation, that, because I'd made a decision to just do one more year, because I was having trouble. My hip was in a bad way, and I was struggling. It was quite painful trying to continue riding, and so I decided I would do one more season and then retire. And so I'd made that decision come the end of the year in 1990, and I finished riding. I'll go through the winter, and I remember clearly driving along the road and in about January, and the realisation that I wasn't going to be riding Speedway that year. It was like a bereavement, because I hadn't really given it enough thought. It was, matter of fact, I was stopping riding, and that was it. But then, I mean, I was only 34, but it was like hit me like a freight train that you're no longer going to be doing this. This is it. It's the end. You're finished. Even though this is like 2 or 3 month delay on this feeling, and so it's a funny thing. I had to come to terms with not doing it ever again. Now, so that was 1991, in January 91. Anyway, Steve, he's asked me to go, are you going to Belle Vue tonight, and talks me into it. And it was in April, I think, and it was quite a warm evening. And I pulled up at the. You've been to Kirkmuseum Lane, have you?
Yeah, absolutely.
So the cluster of lights at the junction that's very near the track.
Yeah.
I pulled up there, and it was quite warm. The window was down, and I could smell the smell, the methanol and the oil and everything, and it wafted in through the window, and I kind of. That was when I decided I was going to ride again, because I
back in.
Yeah, it just sort of tripped something in my head, and I'd been under a bit of pressure from Sheffield. Had been asking me if I would do it, you see, and I'd said no, I'm not interested. Says me, and so that was it. I decided I would do just one one more season. I think it was probably late May, I think, when I started. I did a season for Sheffield, and to be fair, it did confirm that I'd made the right decision, because it was quite tough, and my riding style had to change because my hip had gone really, really stiff, and I was kind of struggling. So I had to let it go, which is very frustrating. And then, but that was 93. So it was 7 years later I had the hip replacement. If I'd have been able to have that done earlier, I'd have probably could have gone on longer, I think.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting, but
yeah.
I mean, that said, it wasn't a bad season, as I said, at Sheffield. But you know yourself, I suppose, that you're not as where you were. You know.
No, that's right. And I was going to some tracks. It was a bit frightening, I've got to say, because I wasn't as heading towards my retirement. Because I mean, people perhaps wouldn't notice watching me ride, but I was very fortunate. The biggest injuries I'd had, I've been fairly low on injuries. You know, for 16 years, the worst I'd had was a couple of broken collarbones and some, not a lot of time off, apart from one at Hackney where I broke my neck and didn't know I'd done it. But so I was very fortunate regarding injuries, but that was, I felt, because of I had an inbuilt radar or something that say knowing when to push it and when not to, and so that I think is quite important to self-preservation is one thing that you need as a speedway rider.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm very fortunate. So I was lucky. So to get away with very few injuries was partly to do with me and partly to do with luck.
Yeah, and quitting while you're ahead
yes.
in life.
Yeah.
And you were awarded the MBE, of course, for your services to Speedway in 1992. I mean, what a fabulous honour that is. And there's not many Speedway riders who have achieved that, but you were one of them, and you had the day out at the Palace. Yeah,
it was fantastic. I mean, it was really, really a great day. And to have got that was quite a shock, I suppose. You know, when it arrived, the thing was me, the envelope it came in to say that I'd been nominated. It looked like a tax demand. Because it's got the, you know. And so my wife had opened it, looked at it, put it back in the envelope, and said, "You better read that." And so that it was, yeah. And a great day. It really was a good day there, and I treasure it. It's something that's quite special to me.
And was it the Queen that presented?
Yes, it was.
As well? Yeah.
I can't remember how far apart this was. So I went to the Palace to pick up the MBE, and I think it was only 2 years later. It might have been the following year. I think it was to do with 30 years of her reign. Invited a lot of sports people to a garden party at the Palace as well, which I went to.
Wow,
great.
Becoming a regular.
Yeah.
You're listening to Humans of Speedway, in conversation with Chris Morton MBE. He's going to be choosing his dream Speedway meeting very soon. Right now, though, for a couple of your questions. Now, a lot of questions that I had sent in were in relation to the National Speedway Stadium, which we're going to hear the full story about now, because it is your lasting legacy and I think gift to Speedway, not just in Britain but in the world as well, because international events are happening there, and one of the great Speedway tracks in the world at the moment, and you're responsible for that. Tell us the story about creating the National Speedway Stadium, because it was a huge, long task to make it a reality, but the dream goes back a lot further than I think anybody realises.
This goes back to Hyde Road days when it was closing in 1987. It was very sad, partly to do with the Taylor report, although personally I don't accept that it didn't have to go. They could have knocked part of the stadium down and still carried on with Speedway. But as it was, Stuart Bamforth owned it, and you know, he had, I suppose, an obligation to himself to try and sell it because he owned it. So and he was never going to be able to restore it back to what it should be. Because it was all wooden, all the stadium was wooden, so it was going to something was going to have to be done to it. So anyway, in the end, it gets effectively knocked down the whole of Belle Vue. I mean, I think it's a bit of shame on Manchester Council to some degree, allowing such a great site to have been, which is now houses and various other commercial things, which is a bit of a shame because it was ahead of its time, really. But that's by the way. So the track's getting sold, and a lot of supporters who were trying to stop this happening. And there was a meeting at one of the council meeting. The council agreed to do a meeting and listen to what all the objectors had to say about it being closed. And I went along to this meeting. This would be 1987. Probably the winter of 87, maybe not, maybe even during the season. So I went along to this meeting, and it seemed quite clear to me. And this meeting was actually at where the new basketball hall is.
Right. Okay.
The one of the council buildings, and in the meeting, I could see that this was going nowhere. They were just paying lip service to. I suppose it often happens with this sort of thing where there was quite a big crowd there, but listened to all the questions, and it seemed pretty obvious to me that this place was going to get demolished, and I was horrified. And I walked out of there, and I had a clear thought in my mind that I thought, right, well, one day, if I ever get the chance, I'm going to try and recreate the track, and that was kind of the seed that I'd planted on that night back in 87, and so that was it. That was the start of it in some way, and it was, even though it's I don't know how many years it is, but 20 odd years later, before it got brought back up again. Because that was something that I toyed about with it for a long time, not involved, because for years I was not involved at all, and it became very clear to me that the only way that you would ever be able to influence anything like this, because obviously PC had gone in with John and set up the new track, the Kirkman Zoom Lane track at the ground stadium, which was great for, we kept Belle Vue Speedway going, which was, but every Belle Vue fan and probably every Speedway fan knew that it just wasn't the same anymore.
Yeah.
But it's something is certainly better than nothing, and it was, as it turned out, the Kirkman Zoom Lane had its it had some glory days, and it was a great Speedway track, but it wasn't Hyde Road.
So all of this time, you've got this idea within you that one day Hyde Road's track is going to make a comeback, and Belle Vue are once again going to have a fantastic place to race on. What was the next step in making that happen? Because it was a number of years that you walked around with this dream and vision of yours, and eventually, to make it a reality, you had to get involved.
Yeah, so I'm carrying this seed of an idea that I carried for years and years and years. Realised that at some point the only way you could ever have any influence on this, you would need to own it, and so that was also part of the thought process. So ownership changed a few times at Belle Vue, and the opportunity came. I'd been recruited to be like commercial manager, try and get some sponsorship for Belle Vue back in 2005, 2006, and so I was sort of involved. And one of the sponsors that sponsored a little bit was David Gordon, and I got to know David quite well, and so we'd go to a few meetings together and things, and quite often what we'd do before the meeting at Belle Vue we'd have a coffee somewhere and then go on to the meeting. And it's at one of these that it'd probably be it was about August of 2006. And I just said to him, would you be interested in getting involved with Belle Vue if it ever came up for sale? And he said, yeah, maybe. But we'd need to get it away from where it currently is. That was kind of the prerequisite that we both agreed was the way to go. I'd always thought that, because it wasn't running Belle Vue I was interested in, it was creating Hyde Road again. That was what I was interested in. So it was a strange thing. Anyway, as it turned out, even though we were having that conversation, it was only a few months later it came on the market. And so we kind of had a kind of look at each other thinking, it's on the market now, what are we going to do? Are we good to our word? Sort of thing. But Gordon Pearman had already started to get involved with it, and so he'd taken it so far, and I think he got to a point where he decided he couldn't do it on his own. Gordon had, and so had a chat with me and a chat with David, and in the end we decided we'd take on Belle Vue. I think Gordon wanted to do it for to be a part of Belle Vue Speedway, and David Gordon and myself wanted to do it so we could maybe have the opportunity to get a brand new venue. That was the start of the whole idea.
Wow.
And so so we take over Belle Vue. So it's 2007. We managed to knock a team together, which was pretty tough. And then in the July of 2007, we'd arranged a meeting to go and see Sir Howard Bernstein at Manchester Council to tell him of our great idea. And I remember the words very clearly that he said. He said, yes, guys, it's not rocket science. We've done it before, which made it sound really easy. But I tell you, it wasn't. It was one of the most difficult times, and probably the first 5 years of running Belle Vue and working towards trying to find a site and trying to get a new stadium. Let's say on paper, they were really the worst years of my life, to be honest. It was so difficult and hard to do.
Wow.
Keeping up that determination and belief.
And knockbacks all the time, and
continuous. Yeah. It was until it happened. It was never going to happen. And many dissenters who saying that you're not going to do this. You're dreaming. And yeah, we were dreaming, but we were determined to make it a reality. And one of the real difficulties with something like this is you get so far into it, you can't. There's almost no way out, and many people who are relying on you because they believe in you and relying on you to come up with the goods. So it would have been easier to back out many times, but we madly just kept going. I often said it was like it's like walking across a ravine and you're up to your neck and you're nearly underwater, and you want to go back, but you're already halfway. You might as well carry on, and it was so much like that. And it was a mountain to climb, and it was 10 years of that. It was, and I say it's 10 years out of my life, to be honest. But important because it was so important to me that to both of us it was. We were there and determined to do it, and we got the stadium built, and I'm extremely proud of the having managed to get Manchester City Council to was to get them to build it, and what was created. Sadly, things went wrong. It was what it was. But in the end, the main thing that we achieved, which was to get a stadium built.
There's a great many people who will thank you as well, because it is an outstanding facility. The track's great. There's some fantastic racing, and I think people do see the hard work that's gone in, and really will appreciate it for many years to come.
Yeah, no, it's and I see that for sure, and I appreciate it as well, because I can without being too cocky, I think we deserve that praise.
Have you ridden on it, and how does it stack up compared to Hyde Road?
No, I've not ridden on it. Although I was the first to ride on a speedway bike, or sit on a speedway bike that was running.
Right.
We did a noise test, and we had a bike there, and I rode it round the first bend.
Wow.
To do the noise test, so I can claim that, but I've not ridden it, and I probably wouldn't do now, but I'm too old. Speedway bikes, it's a young man's game.
I just wondered if before in the construction process there was that one day where you thought, come on, let's just have a go.
Been great, yeah. Anyway.
Well, fantastic, and huge congratulations on that. I know we're pressed for time, so I want to blast through a couple of quick bits. Quick question from one of our listeners called Wayne Newton says, did I really see Chris walk a tightrope at Wembley Arena in the early 80s?
Yes, that was me.
And how did you end up in that situation?
Yeah, that came about because going back to my testimonial year, which I think is 82, I think, believe it or not, the circus was still going at Belle Vue. And Charles, I'm thinking of Charles Ochiltree at Coventry, but so the circus is still going, and so I was offered the circus to as part of the testimonial. So I think the circus was probably on every Saturday or whatever, and so for one of the nights it was for my benefit, so all the Speedway fans could go and watch the circus and see myself and Peter Collins walk a tightrope, which we'd gone and practiced and managed to do. And so I'd had a bit of a go at the circus at Belle Vue, and so I was then asked to do it at I think it was at Wembley Arena at Ian Thomas event, an indoor meeting.
Mm-hmm.
They were just trying to add a bit more, the showman that Ian was. He wanted to add a bit more show to it, and so he'd got a tightrope act in, and got me back up there to show my tightrope walking skills. Which
There's not enough tightrope walking in speedway meetings these
days.
There's
not. No.
Let's move on to another question. This is from Dave in Dewsbury, who asks a question about engines. And we talked earlier about how you were involved with various different engines through the course of your career, and obviously it's something that interests you. How do you think engines that are currently in use, the laydowns, sort of stack up versus the engines that you were using in your era? Is there as big a difference as people make out, and what's your experience across the times?
They are, I'd say they're completely different, because the geometry of a speedway rack is still more or less the same. The lay-down engines and the type of forks they have make them probably slightly easier to ride, but the bikes are so powerful now that the torque of them, which is the power that they get down on the track, is quite incredible, and so it makes them a little bit more difficult to ride, probably in some ways. The rev so much more than the older engines did. They're a very short stroke, and so the rev much higher. They really only operate. I mean, most speedway bikes have only ever been really performing over 80% of the rev range is where they need to be performing. It's probably even more so these days, because you often hear riders saying if you let the power go off too quick, you can't get it back again before you know it, the race is over. And so yeah, it's a different technique. It's as simple as that. You know, each era learns to ride what's in front of them. You know, and I noticed that between the different engines that I rode, each one becomes a different technique that you need to learn to ride it. And I think to say whether one era is better than another, you're only going to watch the GPs and see that some of the racing is outstanding. And so I'm still a Speedway fan, and very much so of the Grand Prix.
You're listening to Humans of Speedway in conversation with Chris Morton MBE. Find out who is in Chris Morton's all-time 1 to 7 next. This is Humans of Speedway, and right now it's time for Speedway Paradise, which is the section that we do in every single Humans of Speedway episode, where we have a look at our guest's dream Speedway meeting. How would it look? Where would it be? And who would be there? So it's the same 6 questions we ask all the time. Which track would you choose? Which stadium would you put that track in? Who'd be in your all-time 1 to 7? Who'd be the referee? Which rule would you change to improve the sport? And who would be the opposition? Those are the questions, and answering them is Chris Morton, who has a bit of knowledge, as we've just heard, about designing tracks and putting dream stadiums together. So I'm hedging my bets here that you might have 1 or 2 thoughts on what your dream track might be.
I've done that. In reality,
yeah, well, yeah, you've answered questions 1 and 2 in real life.
Yeah, that's right. So I'll tell you what I've wrote. I've said that it would be that purely for racing will be the new Belle Vue National Speedway Stadium track. But I would say that obviously. But there is video evidence to back that up. I think we've seen some great racing there, and it delivers, for me, it delivers what I always felt I was trying to put into it within that design. You know, we did, both David and I went to look at lots of different tracks, and we took everything in and applied it all to this stadium and to this track. I carried a lot of the ideas around with me for years and years and years, and then to be able to do this, it was just a fantastic thing to be able to do. And it was designed, of course, influenced very, very heavily by Hyde Road, but for modern Speedway, and I think that's what it's done, because Speedway it's a dangerous sport, but you know, I tried to inject some safety within the design of the track, and I think it delivers that, and also great racing.
Yeah, and what were the other influences? Were it Torren and?
Yeah, Torren. I mean, I recognise that Torren appeared to be a good racetrack, and from what I understand, I think that was based on Bradford. Yeah, but new Bradford. You know, that's now old Bradford, but which is
coming back to be new Bradford again. The building reinstalling the track.
Possibly, but there's something going on there. Yeah. But Per Jonsson, I think, had an influence on Torren, and so and that was a great track, and it's similar in size. It's probably a bit wider, and it's a bit fatter from straight to straight across. The National Speedway Stadium is a bit fatter than that. Similar sort of banking. Banking's so important to create the different racing lines. So that's it. It's definitely the National Speedway Stadium, and I think there's more to offer on that as well yet. Yeah, there's more to see on as people get better and different riders start riding it.
Yeah, well, there's more lines to be found.
Yeah.
And the stadium that you'd put the National Speedway Stadium track in, if you were for the ultimate fan experience, where would you stick it?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you mentioned Wembley, but the problem with a lot of these, bigger stadiums is that you're a bit far away from the racing, and so to honour what the National Speedway Stadium was built for, that's the stadium I would put the track in. Yeah, and lo and behold, that's where it is.
It looks tremendous as well. I've been to it when it was the World Cup.
Yes.
A year or two, 2 or 3 years ago, and it looks incredible when it's got all the, every area has got seating and things like that in as well. It
right,
does look a different level.
Yeah, that was quite a proud moment actually to do that. Although it probably broke us in the end, to be honest. But the World Team Cup, and I'm hoping to bring that formula back again. Actually, to be honest, because I don't like the pairs thing. Anyway.
Yeah. No, I know what you mean.
Okay.
And on to the Dream 1 to 7 then. Any rider, any era, alive or not with us, and no points limits. Who would be in your all-time 1 to 7?
Yeah, I expect this team to hammer my other team, to be honest. But, so my dream team is number 1, Ivan Major.
Wow.
No, but this is not in any particular order, I don't suppose. Number 2, Eric Gundersen. Number 3, Hans Nielsen. Number 4, Thomas Golub. Number 5, Soren Sjoston. Number 6, Chris Pusey. And number 7, Tony Ricardson.
Wow.
I didn't intentionally put 5 world champions in there, but these are the guys that have, if you like, influenced and entertained me.
Yeah.
And I don't think anyone could argue with that lot.
I know that Debbie, Ivan's daughter, listens to these podcasts, and Ivan was a huge influence on you both, as a youngster growing up, and also once you became a rider too, wasn't he?
Yeah, I mean, Ivan was a big influence on Speedway from the time he became clearly the high quality rider he started to change the way it was approached, if you like. I think Ivan did, or showing lots of others how it could be done, and effectively how it should be done. And I often got a lot of help from Ivan, and I was definitely a big fan.
And real mix of eras as well through those riders you've chosen. They're not all from the 70s, 80s. There's some 80s and 90s era riders there as well. It's I mean,
mix. Eric was a great friend. Always used to have great times with Eric Gundersen. Usually, racing against him, but also as a friend. Valued his friendship, and he was an entertainer. Such a great rider.
Yeah.
Hans, I'd always said Hans was my favourite all-time rider, partly because, not necessarily for his entertainment, but the way he could do both things. He could make starts, and he could pass people, riders in many different ways, and it was his style more than anything that caught my eye, if you like, because I use a term that's called close control. Your man and machine as one, and Hans Nielsen I thought was about as close as you get to that.
Yeah, he must have been a nightmare to race against, because he was just so dangerous all the time, wasn't he? You never saw him have an off night.
No, he was prolific, and that was it was always he probably had a few chinks in his armour that occasionally I managed to break, but not very often.
A great team, and we'll find out who the opposition for that is in a few moments. Who would be the referee? Because referees can have a huge influence on how things turn out.
Yeah, the referee would be Graham Brodie. I don't know how many of you people out there remember Graham, but Graham was one of the main referees during my period. He does a lot of work for the FIM. But Graham was one of those. He was very fair, very positive in his decisions. Didn't take any messing, but didn't make any daft decisions. He was consistent. We've got to know him quite well because he was one of the FIM meetings, so he quite often refereed a lot of the meetings that I was in, and I'm not saying he always fell down on my side. He certainly didn't, but I had great respect for him, and so in fact, strange enough, he I think he did my testimonial meeting, so.
Well, there you go. And if you were going to get your hands on the rule book, what rules would you change for the betterment of Speedway, do you think?
Right. Okay. Well, correct me if I'm wrong with any of this, because I'm an ex-Speedway rider, not a referee or a Speedway supporter.
Okay.
So, what I'd say is it bothers me when the authorities start to fiddle with rules unnecessarily, because they do, don't they? I mean, we see it many times. You think, what are they changing that for? Because sometimes I think the authorities feel that they need to change things because it'll create, I don't know, maybe a bit more attention or get more people watching. But of course it won't. But they might fine tune something because it's people are, let's say, cheating or whatever. But
yeah.
But I've always felt that the scoring system that we have, 3, 2, 1, dead simple, 0. It's pure in relation to form, and the rider's average is a true reflection of their ability and form at any one time. Certainly if measured over enough meetings. Mm-hmm. I was a bit disappointed when individual meetings changed to include semis and a final to decide the winner from one race. And that's how the modern Speedway is. And of course it's edgy, exciting, adds an extra dimension, which I accept, and I personally enjoy watching it. But it can be a little bit tough on the riders, but that's almost by the way. But I felt that the way the GP had gone, so I'm not in league racing here with this, but the way that Grand Prix had evolved, I thought it was a great system. And in 2020, they made a decision to change it, which I thought was, I still think, I don't know, but they changed the system so that, I can't remember what it is now, but I know at the time I thought, no, that's not right, because it's not based on, you could have a world champion that isn't necessarily the best rider over the whole series, because the way it had evolved into where you could have, it was the best of both worlds, where you'd have in a Grand Prix, you've got this one race at the end that produces your winner. Still got that, but you could, the riders would still do their absolute best to amass as many points as possible. And at the end of a season of Grand Prix races, you ended up with the best rider in the world, because he'd been the most consistent, and he dealt with everything that was effectively thrown at him, and showed consistency and tenacity. And the 3-2-1 point system proved he was the best rider in the world, and that's what we get, a world champion. And also you get a hero on the night. But the new system, for me, the jury's out. I'm not dismissing it completely yet, but let's see how it evolves.
Yeah, so somebody who could go through the main part of the meeting and finish 8th could end up winning the whole meeting after two other decent heats, effectively, couldn't they? That's.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was still the same on the other system. You had to qualify, but
every point counted, didn't it?
What they've done is taken away all those points that you've scored in a speedway race are no longer relevant once the semis have become decided. And I just think you can work it back, can't you? It wouldn't necessarily give you. It may give you the best rider based on speedway races, but it might not do.
Yeah, I think based on the previous, not this last year, but the year before when they brought it in, if you compared, I think the 2019 season, you would have had a different world champion.
Yes, I think you would have done, which shows that I don't think it's right, because anyway, we'll see, won't we?
And finally, your team from any time in history. From any league in the world, to be the opposition for your team of all-stars who are going to absolutely batter this team you're going to mention, you reckon?
I think so, yeah. But the other thing is, though, because I was trying to find because this is a team that existed.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to find a team that that was the strongest it could be. So I'll tell you what I've got, because it was a Cradley Heath team, because I loved the meetings against Cradley, certainly during the early mid-80s. They were always spectacular. And so it would be the 83 Cradley team, which is considered to be one of probably the best teams for Cradley.
Yes.
The only trouble is, for me, it didn't include, because Bruce by then had retired, and Simon Cross hadn't come on the scene. So what I would like to, so the team is so you know, is Phil Collins, Eric Gunderson, Lance King, Simon Wigg, because I want to get Simon in it, you see.
Yeah.
Peter Ryan, Jano Pedersen and Alan Graham. So on standby, maybe guesting would be Bruce Pennell and Simon Cross.
Not bad guests to have on standby.
Just in case.
Yeah, track reserves.
But they may need them against my dream team.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, having nine riders for Cradley versus your all-stars, I think might just balance it out nicely.
And not only that, Eric Gunderson's got to ride for both teams.
There you go. Good spot. Okay, well, look, it's been fabulous talking to you, Chris. Thanks for spending the time and talking all about the various parts of your illustrious career, and and all the best for the rest of this year. Let's hope it's a more positive one, and you can get back down the speedway at some point soon.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, hopefully we'll watch a bit of live speedway at the stadium sometime this year.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me on, Ian. And if you want me back on again, just get in touch with me and we'll arrange something.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks to Chris Morton MBE for telling us about his career, both on the track and those days of really fighting to give British Speedway and indeed World Speedway a fantastic facility in the National Speedway Stadium as well. And I think all Speedway fans will be eternally grateful. Plenty more episodes coming up in future, and plenty more for you to check out if you're fairly new to Humans of Speedway, in which case you are very welcome indeed, and there's lots to tuck into. If I was going to give you a few recommendations, Kelvin Tatum, fantastic episode. Great to hear from Jeremy Doncaster as well. Gary Havelock, me being a bit of a Bradford fan back in the day, then personally that's one of my faves. So great to sit and chat with him. But something that's a little bit more a bit different, if you like. Find out about what it's like to be a referee. Chris Durno is an FIM referee, and he tells you all about what it's like not only to be a ref, but what it's like to train to be a ref as well. You might be quite surprised with some of the things involved in that one. Also, Phil Morris, the FIM Speedway Grand Prix race director, such a great insight into the amount of work and logistics that goes into organising the Grand Prix. There's just a few picks for you. Check them out at your leisure. And beyond Speedway, there's plenty more for you to check out, and you can find your next favourite sport podcast at sport-social.co.uk. And we'll catch you very soon, next time on Humans of Speedway.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Sports Social Podcast Network.
Looking for a fun way to win up to 25 times your money this basketball season? Test your skills on Prize Picks, the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projection for a wide variety of stats, and place your entry. It's as easy as that. If you have the skills, you can turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. Easy gameplay, quick withdrawals, and injury insurance on your picks are what make Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Ready to test your skills? Join the Prize Picks community of more than 7 million players who have already signed up. Right now, Prize Picks will match your first deposit up to $100. Just visit prizepicks.com/get100 and use code GET100. That's code GET100 at prizepicks.com/get100 for a first deposit matchup to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy.